Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a bill RS 1668 regarding the affiliation of Regents institutions, community colleges, and technical colleges.
Without objection, we'll accept that. Okay, any other bill introductions? Seeing none, we'll start our hearings. Our budget hearing with the Kansas Office of Veterans Services, and we'll have an overview by our staff, Molly Pratt, KLRD. Molly, welcome committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Molly Pratt, and I'm a fiscal analyst. I will be presenting the budget request and recommendations for the Kansas Office of Veteran Services. You will find the budget summary in Volume 2 on page 351. You'll also note that there are no yellow sheets or green sheets because the governor concurred with the agency's request, as did the Special Committee on Legislative Budget and the House. So everything included in the budget summary is currently in House Bill 2007 as amended. So if you look at page 1, you'll probably note that there is a large drop in contractual services between the actuals in fiscal year 2024 and the request in fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026. That isn't because they're using less contractual services, it's because the agency is using their off-budget Medicaid funds to pay for contracted nurses. So my understanding is that the agency is trying to follow the legislator's advice and transitioning away from using SGF to hire contracted nurses and moving toward SGF to pay the salaries and wages of permanent nurses. So that's why there's the large reduction in contractual services between the years. Otherwise, I will turn to page 354 to begin the analysis for fiscal year 2025. Aside from the contractual services, there really are no major adjustments to the agency's request. The agency carried forward $979,000 in reappropriated state general funds into fiscal year 2025. About $450,000 of that was for previously approved supplemental requests and legislative adjustments that were not entered into the accounting system in time. About $400,000 was dedicated for certain projects associated with the veteran cemeteries, and about $115,000 was due to salaries. Otherwise, item 2 concerns the agency's state institution building fund reappropriations. The agency carried forward $16.2 million in SIBF from fiscal year 2024 into fiscal year 2025. The reappropriation is predominantly associated with the construction of the new Northeast Kansas Veterans Home, though a portion is also due to rehabilitation and repair projects at both the Kansas Soldiers Home and Veterans Home. The agency does not know when the VA will appropriate the remaining 65% of the federal funds so that KOVS can construct the home, so that money would likely be reappropriated into the next fiscal year. Item 4 describes the state cemetery grant that the agency recently received from the federal government. They were awarded $1.3 million for expanding the casket and in-ground cremation gardens at the Veterans Cemetery in Winfield. Item 5 discusses some changes to the federal per diem that the agency receives as part of their long-term nursing care program and their domiciliary care program. That item just explains that the per diem funds are difficult for the agency to predict because the number and type of residents at each home may change, and also because the reimbursements are not always receipted into the accounting system at a set schedule. Again, item 6 just concerns all other adjustments. Does the committee have any questions about fiscal year 2025?
Questions on 25? Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay. Fiscal year 2026 begins on page 358. Again, there are no major adjustments to the agency's request from their approved amount. The total amount requested for fiscal year 2026 is $38.7 million, including about $15.5 million in state general funds. The agency is not requesting any enhancements. Item 2 again concerns the nursing personnel, and it explains in more depth what I said at the beginning, that the agency is trying to shift away from using contractual nurses and is instead hiring more permanent nurses with SGF funds. And if there are questions about that, I can go into detail, and I'm sure the agency will also be able to provide additional detail on that too. Item 3 concerns the Soldiers Home capital improvement projects. The agency estimates that they'll expend about $2.2 million on various projects at the Soldiers Home on Fort Dodge. And item 6 just concerns the all other adjustments. The agency deleted $2.6 million in all funds and added $1.7 million SGF in comparison to the previously approved amount for fiscal year 2025. And with that, I would be happy to stand for questions on fiscal year 2026.
Questions on 2026? Seeing none. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Next, we will have the agency presentation with Bill Turner, Executive Director. And we'd like everyone to stick around 5 minutes or so, if you could, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do my best to stay within the limitations there, the time constraints, and thank you all for allowing us to stand before you today and to share in this discussion of our budget this year. So as Molly has already, I think it's described well, the budget piece right now that's been passed over from the House is that largely it's been accepted in whole as it's being passed over to you. We have no supplemental request at this time and no enhancement request for the subsequent year out in the 2026. My primary concern that to hit on particularly are the staffing considerations there that are related to the amendment, the change that was recommended by the House for the sweeping of vacant funded positions across agencies, and then also the 1.5% reduction that's being recommended in our SGF accounts. The staffing piece first. Right now, we are staffed at a certain FTE, approximately 310 people across at our two state veterans homes. Of that, we are only funded to approximately 282 positions. Right now, we are filled to, on any given day, we're probably somewhere between 260 and 265 positions that are occupied at this time, which leaves us somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 22 vacant funded positions. So over the last couple of years, we've received, a great benefit from the pay increases that have been afforded to these facilities. And as such, we have seen our employment of our staff has grown tremendously. We've gone from about 50 to 55% filled in our skilled caregivers up to probably in the neighborhood of 80 to 85% now are filled. In coordination with that and in conjunction with that, we have seen a decrease in our contract staffing of our nursing staff, the reliance on temp agency staffing. That said, we still have, a degree of reliance on temp agency staffing to help fill short-term shortfalls that we experience day to day for our staff as they come into work. These are unforecasted absences from work due to illnesses or in some cases scheduled leaves and things of that nature. We don't have a very deep bench, if you will, down at these facilities. And so having this ability to rotate and having these positions allows us that flexibility to fill those positions and then also to help fund on occasions overtime to be able to pay our own folks to stay during those transition periods when we have shortfalls, moving from one shift to another. It allows us some flexibility there. It allows us some flexibility at the point where we have to go out and contact temp agency staffing and get those folks to come in as well. So that's kind of where that falls right now and the importance of that. We have similar concerns, as do you heard from the state hospitals, in terms of kind of the unique nature of our population of people, very much vulnerable to falls, much older population, only about 25 to 30% of them are ambulatory. They require a high level of care, a high number of people that need to take care of these people on a daily basis. So that's where, you know, our primary concern there lies with that. With that change that was recommended from the House, it was talked about having an exception that was in place for the state hospitals and for the correctional facilities. And that's kind of two arms there of the triad there of 24/7 facilities in our state. And there is no language in there that explicitly addresses the state veterans homes. And I would like to see consideration that the state veterans homes be inclusive in that, to allow us to be able to operate under that same umbrella, being able to have that exception, to have these positions available to us to be able to continue to fill so that we can meet our census needs out at those facilities. The second piece had to do with the 1.5% reduction and kind of the impacts that would have on us. Right now, I mean, we operate off a fairly small budget. It's probably out to about a little over $16 million that we receive in SGF dollars in FY26. When you reduce out some of the other things that were excluded from that 1.5% reduction, that equates to about, the impact to us is a little over $210,000. But I would still tell you that that will impact our ability to provide service to our veterans out there across the state. We've made great strides to service these folks, to assist them with claims and benefits, in addition to having the quality health care at the veterans homes, but then also out at our cemeteries, where we are out there trying to provide, you know, an honorable and dignified last resting place for these veterans out at these 4 cemeteries. And we've been working with the state stakeholders, federal stakeholders that are working with us. And as you heard from Molly, we have gone out to seek federal grants where possible for Winfield Cemetery expansion. We do have an agreement in place with the federal VA for tuition assistance for our nursing staff. It's a 50-50 match, whereby we pay 50% of the tuition assistance for any staff member that is seeking to continue their education as RNs, LPNs. And then, so that is helpful. But then also, just in the context, I think, of what we're seeing, I don't have, and I'd be speculating on what the impacts may be of things that we are reading about or seeing about from the federal level, but we are tracking that. And to date right now, I think we've seen reports of upward of 2,400 now, I think, reductions in the VA staff, and over 500 contracts that have been cut. And the contracts have largely been related to administrative type actions and things like that. What we have received back from the VA at this point is there's no interruption to healthcare services or to veterans benefits services. But I think some of the impacts that we see, it would remain to be seen as we go down the road right now. As you go out, 10, 12, 15 months in the future, when you see delays possibly in veterans claims being done, and these are fairly comprehensive claims to be worked, and the more cuts that we see potentially at that level, obviously I got to believe that there will possibly be impacts and delays there in being able to take care of those pieces. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I will pause for any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. Thank you for what you do for our veterans. A couple quick questions. The state cemetery grant, or what's going on down in Winfield, what funds that fund? Is that federal money? Where's that money come from?
Yes, sir. We applied for a federal grant from the National Cemetery Administration. It's a little over $1 million that it is fully funded by the federal grant.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator Petty.
So did I hear you correctly that at this point in time, you have not felt any impact from the reduction in staff at the federal level with veteran services?
Ma'am, that's a correct statement at this point right now. We have reached out to kind of our federal partners, and we're kind of receiving limited feedback in this point on what the specific impacts may be. So I don't have the exact numbers that the VA regional office down in Wichita or within the hospital facilities, what they may be seeing. So any reports that I get are purely anecdotal at this point.
So you don't know any more than I see on the news?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Other questions? Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. If I heard you right, you're not fully funded to the FTEs that you have,
That is a correct statement, yes, sir.
and you're managing your budgets based on that. And so if you have to fund the contract nurses as they come into your staff, that's funded by, that's understaffing that you're planning on. So you have a plan to handle that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, we do. So we had an FTE that was put in place probably years ago to help to supervise, manage, and run those operations kind of at the max capacity where we could operate at. And as we saw during a period of like COVID, for example, where the census may have been reduced down somewhat, but as we are increasing back up, we're increasing kind of staff commensurate with that to be able to serve those folks. But we are not funded to that full FTE that existed in years past. Yes, sir.
So your request, I thought I said, was to be included with the other state hospitals in not being affected by that FTE reduction. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I just want to kind of piggyback on that question. Can you talk more specifically in terms of that lapse of FTEs, in terms of the practical terms and the impact to your department? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. So right now, as I stated, we've kind of done the calculus to figure out what we think are the staff that we need to adequately run and staff these facilities. It is not tremendous depth at these folks. So as we have folks that are sick, or if you have a situation where you have COVID or things of that nature, and you have to quarantine folks, so to speak, to keep them off the premises because it's a very vulnerable population. Now, at that point, we are reaching out to temp agency. I kind of refer to it as there's a lot of duck paddling going off beneath the surface each and every day. So on a given shift, if you may have 10 or 12 skilled caregivers that are designed to be there on that shift to take care of 30 residents, and you have one or two of those folks not show, now you're going kind of through this battle drill now to reach out, get somebody to come in, and you're also at the same time probably holding over staff members there to work overtime to help fill that gap until you can get somebody there. So we don't have temp agency that are on a long-term agreement. The most we may have is like a 60 to 90 day agreement, maybe, where we anticipate these types of things happening historically, so that we have them, more readily accessible for us to call in and work, because we know that we're going to have some of these vacancies. And so that is where that's helpful to have. And then that coupled with, we are still experiencing somewhere around a 30 to 33% turnover rate each year right now. So that's where we're kind of seeing this turnover. Largely, that manifests itself more in like the CNAs, if you will, probably the folks that are not as much experienced there, that are more transient in nature.
Other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I need clarification. I know I could look back at the video, but I don't have time right now. I heard you say, because of a note that I made, that you have 20 to 22 vacant funded positions. Did I mishear, or because it's semi-conflicting with what you just indicated to Senator Alley?
So I do, sir. So what I'm saying is that, for example, at the Kansas Veterans Home, you have a total FTE there of a little over 190 some folks there. That's on the books there as FTE. When I first got here back in 2021, they were probably filled to about 125 to 127 staff members. As the census has increased, we have asked for funding and the ability to fill specific positions to gradually raise this up, because back then too, when we only had 125 to 127 folks, we were probably only staffed at a rate with our skilled caregivers that forced us to be using temp agency staffing probably 45 to 50% of the time. And so what we've been trying to do is to kind of close that gap, is to hire incrementally more more skilled caregivers to be able to provide those services, then have to pay less than the temp agency in so doing. But we've never gone all the way up to that full FTE amount. We've been trying to look at this in a responsible manner, say, yeah, this is what we think we need. And then what I'm saying is, that said, day-to-day operations, we still experience shortfalls out there at these facilities. And I kind of use the example, sir, if I don't show up to work tomorrow, there will be people that can handle what I do and will be in there and be able to handle that kind of day-to-day operation. But if I'm out there on a nurse shift and I have 10, 2 RNs, two LPNs, and 6 CNAs, and they don't show up, and I have a 20% ambulatory population of folks, I'm immediately in a crisis. And so,
All that, you still didn't
yes,
answer my
sir.
question. I heard you say that you have 20 to 22 vacant funded positions. Yes or no?
Yes, sir, I said that. And I said that's correct, sir. So if you have,
So that's all we need to know for this question, is because you have 20 to 22 vacant funded positions. I understand all about the staffing needs, understand all of that. What is the relationship, and I understand there's some requirements for the veterans, I don't even know what your name is now, it's been changed, with the VFWs and the American Legions. My understanding is they do a great job in some areas of assisting veterans that need veteran services, maybe to even the point of they do a better job than what the agency does. Comments on that? What's the funding and what's the relationship with the VFWs and the American Legions?
yes, sir. So there is a Veterans Claims Assistance Program grant that's been in effect since back to 2006. And it's fluctuated, I guess, in the level of support that the state funds for that program. And what that does is it allocates funds from the state to help fund veteran service officers from select veteran service organizations that choose to participate and meet the criteria for participation. In the past, they were manned at the veterans healthcare facilities in Wichita, Topeka, and Leavenworth. They are now, we've expanded it to include the VA regional office down in Wichita as well. So they have folks there that work. They do work in the exact facilities. So kind of as an informal agreement, I understand this happened well before I was here. We do not have people from the Kansas Office of Veteran Services. We have one individual right now that just recently moved into the Topeka Center. But otherwise, the VFW and the American Legion have representatives that are credentialed by their respective veteran service organizations to work in there. We work in partnership with them. We cross-credential one another. We share powers of attorney to be able to take care of these veterans. Our VSOs are geographically dispersed throughout the state to be able to take care of veterans across the state in rural areas and higher populated areas as well. The VFW and the Legion folks are centrally located in those facilities. And they probably have at any given time somewhere around 16 to 20 individuals that operate in there. We have about 23 with our mobile units that operate, but we work closely. It's about as you might imagine, it's about a 50-50 split right now in the services that are provided between the two organizations. They're almost equally staffed. By virtue of being in those medical care facilities, they receive a large influx of veterans that are coming there for care because of just the nature of what happens there. And so, yes, sir, but that we work together to do that and to take care of the veterans in the state.
You cannot address it, but there's currently an audit going on as it relates to the veterans, Kansas veterans, and the VFWs and the American Legions. And so I'm not asking you to comment, but that's mostly, Mr. Chairman, information for the committee. I think that this organization could do a better job of working with our VFWs and our American Legions to allow these veterans who are retired to assist current veterans that are younger. And that's just a comment from myself.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I made some confusion there. I'm going back to the 2026 budget request was 376 FTEs. That's what you requested. That is not fully funded FTEs. You have a number reduction from there that's fully funded, and then from there you're staffed at another reduction from that portion. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Could you give us about what those numbers are?
So our reductions are most resident in the veterans' homes. I think we are maybe short one vacancy right now out in our veteran service reps that provide the veteran services out there across the state. And I think we have I may be short two right now in our central office that have just recently turned over. We just have one new hire, and I have one other position that we are looking to hire.
So what would your FTE funded positions be? How many would that be approximately?
Sir, I'm sorry, I'd be hazarding a guess, but if the total is at 376, I would say we're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 345.
And you're staffed a little bit below that, is what you're telling me.
Yes, sir, yes, sir, that's what the funded amount is, and then the vacancies fall then beneath that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, Bill, thank you for being here today. Appreciate all you do for our veterans. Thank you. Next, we will have the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. We'll have a staff overview by Kyle Anderson at KLRD. Kyle, welcome committee.
Oh, sorry. I am Kyle Anderson, KLRD. Microphone should now be on, hopefully. Starting out in Volume 2, the KBI budget summary should begin on page 418. It will also have an entry on page 24 of the green shorthand and page 3 of the blue shorthand. So getting started, on page 418, the table there has the actual numbers for fiscal year 2024, the agency's revised request for fiscal year 2025 of $68.99 million, and the agency's request for fiscal year 2026 of $158.37 million. Similarly, the final position of the House in HB 2007 for fiscal year 2025 is $63.94 million, and for fiscal year 2026 is $60.30 million. Turning to page 419, we can get into the breakdown of the fiscal year 2025 analysis. The agency has no supplemental request for fiscal year 2025, but did have an SGF reappropriation of $29,618. This reappropriation is associated with the meth lab funding fees. The agency gets roughly $50,000 a year, but the number of meth lab cleanups varies from year to year. Sometimes it's a little more than $50,000, sometimes it's a little less than $50,000. So with 2024 being a little bit less than $50,000, the funds get reappropriated to the meth lab cleanup fund for the following year. Are there any questions about the fiscal year 2025 breakdown?
Questions on 25? Seeing none, please proceed.
Moving to page 422 on the budget book, we will move to fiscal year 2026. And the agency had 6 different enhancement requests for fiscal year 2026. The first of these was a request of $93 million for a new headquarters facility. This was not funded by the House and had been removed by the special LBC committee. The House added language for the agency to continue talks with the legislature in finding a replacement facility for the current headquarters of the agency. Item number 2 is a request of $1.2 million for laboratory infrastructure. If you look at the green shorthand and the yellow shorthand handout. This request was partially funded by both the House and the governor's budget. The governor provided what page should I say? 24, I believe, yes. So the governor and the House both requested funding with $500,000. The House initially intended to fund this like the governor had with SGF funding, but the funding was replaced in the HB 2007 final wording to use ARPA interest funding. That item was removed by the ARPA interest global motion. Item number 3 is KBI security positions and wages associated with the SB 291 changes. This was originally a request for $1.1 million in 2 FTE positions. In both the House and the governor's position, this is partially funded. The wages directly associated with the 2 positions are funded at $355,363, and the supporting infrastructure for the request was not funded. Item number 4 is KBI Security Storage Area Network request for $526,000. This was not funded by the House or in the governor's request. Item number 5 is the offender registration compliance system. This is a software suite that assists the local law enforcement agencies in entering offender registry information for various criminal offenders that are required statutorily to register. And that's a request for $500,000. The governor requested that this be funded with SGF funds. The House's final position in HB 2007 was to fund this with ARPA interest monies. This was removed by the ARPA interest global removal. And item number 6 is the career progression plan associated with the organization, and that is currently funded as well. Are there any questions for fiscal year 2026?
Questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
I will direct your attention to page 427 of the book. This is the breakdown of the capital improvements project. The current position in the House moves the debt service out of the agency and into the Department of Administration in the aggregation that was discussed the other day with the Department of Administration. Any questions on capital budget?
Questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
I believe that should be everything until the agency has its presentation, unless there are further questions.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Next, we'll have the agency presentation. We'll have Tony Mativi, Director. Tony, welcome to committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to talk with you about the KBI's request for our budget for 2025. As you are aware from many of our prior discussions, our primary headquarters facility. Our current headquarters was built as Crane Junior High School and was initially occupied for that purpose 10 years before the KBI even came into existence. 27 years ago, an independent appraiser reported the property suffers from functional obsolescence. That continues to be the case. Unfortunately, the state of the building is such that, in my view, it is a significant liability to the state because it's not safe. Most folks aren't aware that 87% of the people in and out of that building on a daily basis are not sworn or commissioned agents. They are the support staff, the information technology services people, admin, clerks. They are the unsworn folks, often in that building 24/7, providing administrative support to the round-the-clock administration of the criminal justice system. Those are the folks who are most endangered by the location and the lack of physical security in that building, and the greatest reason that I see it as a liability. In addition to that, there are features that we would want in any efficient, modern law enforcement building that aren't available to us in that building. Many of you remember very well the white powder letters case from 2023. Our command center for that operation, for the first 70 to 96 hours of the operation, was our conference room. Because we don't have a command post in that building or even a multi-use facility that's suitable for us to pivot and use as a command post. You have been incredibly supportive to us in our requests to improve our recruitment and our retention abilities when it comes to agents in particular. We are very close to being within full staff of agents, which is unusual in law enforcement right now, and we owe that in large part to your responsiveness to our requests. But I will tell you that when it comes to the building, we don't have a training facility. We beg, borrow, and steal training space every time we put on a new agent class. We don't have kennel space for our canines. We don't have equipment locker rooms for the agents. We don't have media production facilities, which are incredibly useful to us right now when it comes to getting out our message about fentanyl. Again, we're in a position where we have to beg, borrow, and steal those kinds of facilities for us to use. The needs assessment that we had done by an independent outside architectural firm came back with a recommendation not only that will this site not continue to accommodate a functioning workspace, but they did an in-depth analysis of what they believe we need. And the answer is about 135,000 square feet on a footprint of about 7 to 9 acres, total estimated cost of $115 million. I'm not standing here asking you for $115 million. First of all, we are willing to look at creative ways to try to accomplish this result, but we also look hard and diligently for efficiencies and things that we can do to try to bring that number down. One example would be training. If we pivot training away from the headquarters facility, for example, to combine with another state agency, our estimates are that we could save $15 million by moving training and associated programs out of headquarters into a combined facility. Let's take $15 million off the top. So we continue to be involved in discussions like that. We continue to look for those efficiencies. When it comes to a solution, from our perspective, anything is on the table. Whether it's a new build, whether it's a remodel to suit, all that we know is continuing to operate in this facility is not tenable. And our estimates are that just getting the current facility up to code, just getting it up to code would have a price tag of about $86 million. So that's where we stand with regard to headquarters. Our view is that investing in this infrastructure isn't just about a building. It's about enhancing every function that Kansans rely on for safety. A modernized facility is critical to protecting, just as an example, our secure communication system, which serves more than 400 law enforcement agencies across the state, more than 1,500 criminal justice agencies, and more than 8,000 individual users all across the state, and yet it's housed right now right underneath a persistent water leak that we continue to combat on a daily basis. The parking garage is crumbling around us. I don't want to go into too much detail. I hope that gets across the point that the building we're in is a liability. We are looking for creative solutions and asking for your help to get us into a safe and efficient facility. With regard to the other requests in the budget, we're just asking we're asking that you follow the governor's recommendations in House Bill 2007. The career progression plan, when the CPP was initially implemented, it was set up in a way that we have to come back each year and ask for the delta between last year and this year so that we can keep those agent and scientist salaries advancing at a designated rate to help us with that recruitment and retention that I've mentioned before that you all have been so helpful to us up until now. To continue the CPP, we estimate $239,626 for next year. That's part of our request and part of the governor's rec. We have requested funding for the positions that were created by Senate Bill 291, but that weren't funded. So that's $355,363. We have requested to replace obsolete laboratory equipment. Our initial request was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. The governor recommended funding that to the tune of $500,000. That will allow us to increase the frequency with which we are replacing the very important and very expensive equipment in our lab that criminal justice agencies across our state rely on a regular basis. We have requested $500,000 to replace K-Sort, the Kansas Sex Offender Registration System. That is a request that doesn't benefit the KBI. It benefits the sheriff's departments all around the state. As soon as I came into this job about 26 months ago, I began hearing from the sheriffs that the platform that we give them for tracking registered offenders, whether they're sex offenders, drug offenders, or violent offenders, it wasn't adequate. And those complaints were completely valid. And over the last 2 years, we've done a deep dive into the K-Sort system. We figured out what we think is a good and effective solution. It would be a statewide implementation of a platform provided by a third-party vendor. Some sheriff's departments in Kansas are using that platform now and paying for it independently. I feel that we have an obligation to our sheriffs across the state to give them a tool that they can effectively use for this very important purpose. So although it doesn't benefit us, we have made the request for that funding in our budget. Governor's office the governor recommended it. I have pledged to the secretary, to the budget director, that we will apply for federal grant funding under what's called the SORNA Act. The SORNA has money available for these purposes. Receiving this money in our budget will not prevent us from actively, diligently pursuing federal funding to replace that state funding. So we will continue to seek funding from the federal government under SORNA. That's it with regard to the budget. I would like to make a quick comment about Senate Bill 99, which I know is of particular interest to some of the folks on this committee. Last year, we came to you with a request to for you to give us funding to establish a child victim unit in the southeast region of the state. As a reminder, we've had a CVU in the northeast region for about 8 years. It was a pilot project, and it's been incredibly successful in cutting down the number of outstanding open investigations with regard to what we call CSAM, child sexual abuse material, and internet crimes against children. The CVU in the Northeast region was a success. So 2 years ago, we asked, and you responded, with funding for us to create a CVU in the West region. And last year, you responded with funding for us to create a CVU in the Southeast region to close the loop. So we now have the funding available for CVUs in each investigative region of the state. We are still trying to staff up the CVU in the Southeast region that you authorized last year, that you funded and appropriated last year. The fact is, these are incredibly specific positions, and they're difficult to recruit for. And it's not a lack of diligence. We are actively working to try to get all of those positions staffed up. But finding the right people is incredibly difficult. And then we have a very long onboarding process because of the process that I think understandably and necessarily we put agents through. Often, once we find the right candidate, it can take us 9 months to get the background done, the polygraph examination, and get them on board. Unfortunately, we still have a handful of CVU positions in the West region that we're still trying to staff up. Because in the West region, we have a combination of not just the special nature and of the position, the incredibly difficult nature of the job, the difficulty we have recruiting the right candidate, and then on top of that, it's in the West region where we historically have had difficulty recruiting the right kinds of agents. So I completely support the idea of Senate Bill 99. As a taxpayer, I couldn't support it more. As an agency head, I would ask you for consideration to allow us some accommodation when it comes to recruiting in those very difficult areas and some accommodation of the very long background process that I think everybody agrees that we need for the folks who do that kind of work. So that's my comment with regard to Senate Bill 99. I'm happy to stand for questions on that or any other matter that I've discussed today.
Thank you, Tony. Questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 quick ones here. How do you measure success? You was telling about the program, it's been successful. How do you measure that?
We measure that particular area with regard to the decrease in the amount of pending or backlogged CSAM investigations that are out there. Right before we stood up the CVU in the Southeast region, we knew that there were more than 200 tips or investigations that we hadn't been able to address. So the way that we measure success there is by cutting down the backlog of tips or tips that haven't been investigated. That's the short answer, Senator.
Okay. Quick follow-up. Fentanyl, we did some new FTEs and was really trying to focus on that. I'd be interested when you get time to see a report card on that.
Well, I'll be happy to give you that. I love the question, and I relish the opportunity to brag about what I think an amazing job our folks are doing with regard to fentanyl. The JFIT's out there every day. They're knocking it out of the park. We unfortunately still see a lot of it, but thank you, Senator. I'd be happy to share that with you.
Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tony, for being here. I want to go back to that SB 99. You eloquently outlined the impact to your particular agency in terms of those positions. I'm guessing, you know, that is not just unique to your department in terms of sometimes there's a long process and very specific positions.
I'm sorry, Senator, I really can't comment on anything outside of our department. I can tell you with regard to our department, I totally support the premise, but it's difficult for us to find the right people, especially in the West region of the state. We struggle there recruiting-wise, and we have for years. And then even once we do identify the right candidate, it takes us a very long time to put them through the entire process and get them on board.
And then if I may, thank you for bringing up the issue with the case sort, because I had been told that we didn't have that information going out, and I wasn't aware it's because of the equipment, correct?
So when K-Sort was established, the KBI, I think, was exercising all of its best efforts, and they took a software platform that was provided by the FBI, made available on a nationwide basis for free to law enforcement, and the agency did everything that they could to adapt it and suit it for use by Kansas sheriffs. The bottom line, though, is that you get what you pay for. And over time, that system has just fallen further and further behind to the point where I agree with the sheriffs who were complaining. It is an inadequate tool. We have failed at our mission of providing them the tool that they need to track sex offenders, drug offenders, and violent offenders. So when we did a deep dive into it, I believe we've come up with a solution in the grand, although it's a lot of money, in the grand scheme for what it's going to allow these sheriffs to do. I respectfully submit to you that it's money well spent. And rather than have each of those 104, 105 agencies go to their governing body, I do feel an obligation on behalf of the state for us to provide them with this software.
Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony today. Not a question, just more of a comment. As I've been able to sit on state building construction and weeding through some of the studies and the needs assessments for facilities. We talk about the performance and asking you today what that looks like, but the ability to perform well is also subject to have the training facilities. And just in my personal opinion, as I look at KBI and KHP and the law enforcement in general in this state, we're behind the track, and I think legislation is going to have to take a deeper dive in getting a game plan and funding it for the sake of our citizens. And so I do appreciate what you do, and those are my words. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. If I may, my comment would be, we are trying very hard to do this in a way that makes us good stewards of the taxpayers' money.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. In regards to Senate Bill 99, how many unfilled funded FTEs do you currently have? Unfilled funded FTEs, I'm sorry.
Unfilled funded FTEs, I'd have to get back to you, Senator. I can tell you that with regard to agents, I believe it's 12 out of 118.
And how long have those been open?
Various lengths of time. Obviously, we combat retirements and departures. I'd be happy to get back with you with specific numbers.
And do you know how much those salaried positions or those positions, how much funding you've received?
I don't, but the gentleman sitting right behind me in the room could answer that question for you. So if you would allow me to have him get to you, we'd be happy to do that.
That'd be fine if he's got the number handy.
Just threw you under the bus. Are you good? He said, now?
Hey, I'm Paul Weisgerber. I'm the Chief Fiscal Officer at KBI. We have globally, about 25 and a half that are SGF funded, that have been vacant for more than 180 days, kind of getting to your question. That's about $2 million. We're actively in the process of filling all of those positions. They're in various states of that process, like the director mentioned. There's 12 agent positions that we're in the process of filling right now. They're going through the process. We've selected those individuals and going through that, so.
Thank you. Do you know if any of those have been open longer than a year?
Yeah, I don't know how many of those have been open longer than a year. I'm not going to be able to respond to that directly.
Okay, so
I'm not 100% sure.
approximately $2 million. Where is that $2 million?
Where is it in terms of how do we utilize those dollars?
Correct.
Some of that money we just got this year, so it'll be unused dollars. When we go through the budget process, say this fall, we will resubmit our budget that looks for either turning that money back in or repurposing that in a different way. And that'll come to the budget committee, so you guys will have an opportunity to review that. So sometimes we can utilize it for old equipment, vehicles, things of that nature that's related to the program.
Okay, so for other expenses. So what I hear the objection is, we have to have that money in case we fill that position, and if we don't know if that money's going to be there for that position, how do we fill it? Would there be any objection to having that money set aside but not in your agency to be used for other purposes other than for positions?
So the question is just having it specifically directed towards
Correct.
salary? No, we wouldn't have an objection with that.
And it not sit within your department?
I think we would need to have access to that, so that way we could make those offers. I mean, that would be a challenge for us to be able to offer a position that we don't have an expectation that we would for sure receive those monies.
To be clear, we're not at all opposed to a compromise in that regard. I understand what the purpose of Senate Bill 99 and the spirit of it. We wouldn't have an objection to anything like that. But, I mean, you said, so we have the money available in case we fill the position. I would ask you to just recharacterize that a little bit and say so that the money is available when we fill the position, but we have to have the money available when we fill the position.
And SB 99 cuts no position. It just lapses the funding after 180 days. And that's the problem, Mr. Chair. It does not prohibit anyone from continuing to look to fill those positions. But I think this points to the issue of we are paying for workers agencies are using those funds for something else, we need to make that money available for those critical positions, but I think that there's a better, more efficient way to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator, I would thank you for that clarification because that's different from my understanding. My understanding was that if we hadn't filled the position within the time, we would lose it. So thank you very much for that.
Senator Owens.
Thank you, and I think Senator Erickson was quite literally reading my mind as I was going down each one of those very similar questions. What I was thinking one step further is that the money is, and I don't want to overburden the State Finance Council, but that money is set aside or lapsed to the State Finance Council so that when you're ready to make that hire, you come before them, because they meet regularly, and say, okay, here we are, we need that money. Because to Senator Erickson's point, we have well over 1,000 paid positions throughout various agencies, and that funding is being used for something else. Whereas it could be used for, I don't know, a new KBI building, with, you know, many of these employees not being hired during that period of time, but still creating a mechanism where when you're ready to make that hire, you can petition State Finance Council or some other entity that can then say, yeah, approved.
So if I could comment. So Senator, I hope that if you were to go back through our budget and see what we sometimes do use that other funding for, if we pivot and use it for something else, it's for things like replacing the generator and the $12,000 generator in our crime scene command truck that unexpectedly blew up and that we didn't have budgeted for. I would think and hope you'd see us spending it on things that you would understand and approve of. But with regard to the spirit of the law, again, no objection. And as long as we have the money available, we wouldn't have any problem with doing it that way. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not implying that you're doing anything wrong with the money. I am simply saying that it's not being used for its intended purpose.
Absolutely.
And we should be more clear and transparent with the taxpayers when that money is being used for something else.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over a decade ago, I toured your current facility. At that time, there were a lot of deficiencies in the building. So my question, Director Mattivi, this has been talked about a lot over the last year or so. What about before that? Has it been falling on deaf ears, or the agency just really never seemed to make it a priority that Legislature, this is critical?
Yeah, so I don't know what was happening before 26 months ago when I showed up. I can tell you that there was nothing along these lines in the first budget that I presented. I can tell you, though, that it's not unusual for us to come over here with a request for funding things like, and I'll use this as an example, the service area networks that so desperately need to be upgraded to allow us to continue to protect the IT infrastructure that's so important to our state. And it's not unusual for us to have conversations about the budget, about how critical is that? Can we strip that out and save it for next year? What I can tell you about the headquarters now, Senator, is we have reached the critical point. We have to, the repairs that we have to do just to keep the place functioning and the doors open right now are things like we have concrete falling in the parking garage. That's about a $600,000 expense. The roof is leaking. That's about a $1.3 million expense. So we have reached critical mass with regard to the headquarters. And beyond 2 years ago, I'm not qualified to comment on what the requests were.
Along that lines, I know that you said that you're willing to look at anything. You've looked at new construction, you've looked at repurposing, remodeling, et cetera. Are you looking at a big area, or are you trying to confine it to Shawnee County?
We haven't looked outside Shawnee County, Senator.
Why not?
Not that we're not open to the idea, but I'm happy to consider anything, anywhere.
Nothing against Shawnee County, but it might be able to find something at a lower cost. Yeah. And then finally, what about some federal grant money through the FBI or through Pentagon or something like that?
So
because the fact that you are the top law enforcement agency in our state.
So we fund a significant amount of our operations using whatever grant funds we can find. We have folks inside our agency who that's what they do. And we've had some pretty good success with that. We will continue to explore those opportunities. And just like the SORNA grant for funding the K-sort replacement, even if we were to receive funding and were then able to obtain grant funding, we would come back and let you know that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is something I would like to see us do, but I don't feel like the agency has fully vetted all their options. Plus, I'm not willing to spend that kind of money. I do get weak kneed when KBI comes before us because of my background. And I don't mean it that way. I about lost my train of thought now, but just because the fact that I see this as the #1 priority of government, law enforcement. So I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, when the docking building came about and we started thinking about tearing it down or doing something with that, was KBI included in that planning?
So my understanding, it precedes my position, but my understanding is there was a conversation about putting the KBI in the docking building, and for whatever reason, it was decided that that wasn't an acceptable option, and I don't know why.
Have you had discussions with the Department of Administration on a plan when we move out of other buildings and moving back into those?
I can't overstate the extent to which the Department of Administration has been helpful to us in this process. They have been a true partner. I feel like they are working hand in hand with us to try to find us an acceptable location.
Would a leased facility work for you?
Yes. We could absolutely make that work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make this brief, but I asked this question to another law enforcement agency. At what point of concern do you have that some of these things like cement falling from the garage become a liability to the state?
Right now, Senator, we are at that point in that building. I can show you pieces of concrete that are falling out of the ceiling of the parking garage. We can show you places in the building where, when it rains, we have drip pans set up with plastic tubing that goes around a corner into a sink to keep rainwater from dripping onto our IT systems. I'd be happy to show you around sometime if you'd like to come over. We're at that point, Senator.
Yeah, and I know the other senator would like to see things in Montgomery, but I keep it here.
Senator Holscher.
Thank you again for being here and pointing out the issues with the current facility and everything. And I do think it's something that we need to think about moving forward. And just sorry, it sounds like a timing issue quite a bit in terms of who was there before you, and because obviously these things take a lot of planning. So like I said, I appreciate what you have pointed out to us, and like I said, understand the timing perspective of when you came on board, and maybe your predecessor had different ideas.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. Obviously, I'm a very different person and a very different director. I know what I'm faced with today, and I do see it as a liability for the state right now.
Well, thank you, Tony. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you all very much.
Next, we'll have the Office of the Attorney General Staff Overview, Arana Waddell, KLRD. Or is that a Raina? Raina, probably.
Yes, volume. Yeah. Page 69.
What page?
Page 69, volume 1.
I think she's in volume 1. Are you in volume 1?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think 61. What's the page number?
Page 69.
I think we all have our books now, if you want to begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Ariana Waddell, and I am a fiscal analyst representing the Kansas Legislative Research Department. And today I'll be presenting the budget for the Office of the Attorney General. Once again, if you could please turn your attention to volume 1, page 69, and also to page 1 on the green sheet as well. And also you should have a yellow sheet that shows the governor's difference from the Legislative Budget Committee recommendation as well. There should also be a yellow sheet. The fiscal year 2025 agency request is $52.5 million in all funds, including $13.3 million SGF in unbudgeted expenditures and 201 FTE positions in FY 2025. This is an all-fund increase of $4.2 million, or 8.6%, including an increase of $1.3 million, or 10.5% above the amount approved by the 2024 legislator. I'm going to note that the Special Committee on Legislative Budget recommended $51 million, including $11.9 million SGF and 199 FTE positions. And this includes a deletion of all the supplemental requests and also a deletion of some of the agency's SGF reappropriations. The House current position is $58 million, including $18.9 million SGF and 200 FTE positions. And if you could please turn your attention to 71 for the breakdown of the FY 2025 requests. The agency revived estimate includes SGF reappropriations of $322,105, which includes $226,000 in unspent litigation expenses for criminal trial travel, $94,000 for canceled subscription for fraud detection software, and $748 for unspent operating expenditures due to a trial at the end of the fiscal year. I'm going to note that the LBC deleted $226,000 to lapse the reappropriation for the unspent litigation expenses for the criminal trial travel in FY 2025, and the House concurred with this deletion. And if you could please turn your attention to page 72. The agency supplemental request includes $1.3 million and 2 FTE positions in FY 2025. And this includes $830,000 SGF to continue natural gas litigation. But I'm going to note that the agency now indicates that they are withdrawing the natural gas litigation request and do not need this supplemental funding. In addition, the agency is requesting $191,906 and 2 FTE positions for a Chief Information Security Officer, or a CISO, and IT support position, and also funds for security updates, software, and associated maintenance in FY 2025. I'm going to note for the CISO position, that salary and wages would be $63,558. And for the IT support position, that would be $28,349. And for the cybersecurity updates, software and maintenance, that would be $100,000 in the request. And I also want to note that the salary and wages for the 2 positions are prorated. The House added $63,000 SGF and 1 FTE position for just a CISO position. And we'll note that this is reflected on page 1 of the green sheet, and that's item number 2 in FY 2025. And if you could please turn your attention to page 73, the agency is also requesting $248,322 SGF for the Victim Information and Notification Everyday System. And that's VINE. And VINE is a service provided through the collaboration of Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Office of the Attorney General, the Kansas Sheriff's Association. VINE allows victims of crime to search for offender located in the county's jail custody status and register to receive notifications when the offender's custody status has changed. And to note that the system was funded by a federal grant through KDHE, which was in effect through September 30th, 2024. The 2024 legislature approved 300,000 SGF for the initial estimate of supporting Vine for FY 2025. However, the updated quote shows that the required funding is $548,000. As a result, the agency is now requesting an additional $248,000 to fully fund the Vine system. The House did not recommend providing the Vine system funding in FY 2025, so this isn't reflected on the green sheet. In addition, the House added proviso for the Safe and Secure Firearm Detection Program. That's the first item on page 1 on the green sheet. The House added 7 million SGF to the Safe and Secure Firearm Detection Program and required that the Office of the Attorney General hire a vendor to provide a firearm detection software for public entities and accredited non-public schools. And this software would have to detect visible unholstered firearms and alert staff and responders, meet federal anti-terrorism standards under the Safety Act, integrate with building security cameras, and be operated by trained analysts in a monitored center, and also be developed in the US without a third-party data. In addition, there was other changes in the agency budget, which were absent the supplemental requests, and that included an increase of 2.9 million in the base budget expenditures, and a deletion of 0.9 FTE positions. And these other adjustments or other changes included an increase of 1.8 million in other assistance, and that was primarily related to the Kansas Fight Addiction Fund. And there was also an increase of $878,000, which related to contractual services. That's for like the council contract lawyers and assigned counsel non-contract lawyers for the civil division. And also there was an increase of $619,000 for aid to local units, and that was related to the Municipality Fight Addiction Fund and the drug abuse resistant education or DARE stipends. Any questions for fiscal year 2025, Mr. Chair?
Thank you. Questions? Senator Petty.
So were any of these in the governor's?
Mr. Chair, once again, the yellow sheet shows the governor's difference from the LBC committee recommendation. The governor did recommend the $830,000 for the SGF for the natural gas litigation. The governor also recommended the Vine system funding, and I'm sorry, this is for FY 2025. The government recommended $91,000 just for the CISO position. And also the governor recommended a deletion of the transfer of $460,000 from the Kansas Endowment for Youth, or the Key Fund, to the Attorney General's Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement Compliance Fund in FY 2025. And for FY 2026, the governor did recommend well, I wasn't sure. I apologize. Mr. Chair, did you want me to go ahead and cover fiscal year 20?
Let's see if there's anybody questions on 25. Anyone else have any questions on 25? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For fiscal year 2026, the agency requests $54.1 million in all funds, including $12.1 million SGF in unbudgeted expenditures and 204.2 FTE positions. This is an all-fund increase of 6.1 million or 12.7%, including an SGF increase of 336,000 or 2.9% above the fiscal year 2025 approved amount. The Special Committee on the Legislative Budget recommended $52.7 million, including 10.7 million SGF and 199.2 FTE positions, which this figure reflects the global deletion of enhancements by the LBC. The House current position is $60.8 million, including 18.8 million SGF and 203.2 FTE positions. And if you could please turn your attention to page 75 for a breakdown of fiscal year 2026 requests. The agency's enhancement request includes 1.3 million SGF and 5 FTE positions, and this includes $304,853 and 3 FTE positions for 2 auditors and 1 special agent, and secondary costs to support the work performed by the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. And for the 2 auditor positions, that would be $87,000 each, and $84,000 for the 1 special agent. And for the secondary cost, that would be $44,000. I'm going to note that the House added the $304,000 and the 3 FTE positions. And additionally, the House concurred with the Budgets Committee recommendation that the agency provide a report to the Budget Committee next year on the return of investment of the Office of the Inspector General Division. And this is reflected on page 1 of the green sheet, and that's item 3 for FY 2026. In addition, the agency is requesting $450,000 SGF to facilitate relocating and housing several divisions to the Memorial Hall building for FY 2026. And this request includes $100,000 for moving the agency's office equipment and supplies and $350,000 for non-capital office furniture. And currently the agency has several divisions that are located across various state office buildings. And I'm gonna note that the agency's administration is currently situated in the Memorial Hall, while the staff members are located in the Mills Building, the Curtis State Office Building, and the Landon State Office Building. So the agency was requesting to move into the Secretary of State's office, which will become available for fiscal year 2026. The House current position was to add $350,000 SGF to relocate and house several of the divisions. And this is reflected on page 1 of the green sheet, and that's item number 2 for FY 2026. In addition, the agency is requesting $343,000 in 2 FTE positions for once again, the CISO and IT support funding, and also for the cybersecurity updates, software, and associated maintenance for FY 2026. This request is similar to the 2025 request, with the exception that the salaries and wages aren't prorated. I'm gonna note that the House current position was to add $155,000 and 1 FTE position for the CISO position for FY 2026. So just the CISO position. And this is reflected on page 1 of the green sheet, and that's on item number 5 for FY 2026. Also, the agency is requesting $248,000 for the Vine system for FY 2026. I'm gonna note that the House did add the Vine funding for FY 2026. That was the $248,000. In addition, similar to the proviso for FY 2025, the House added 7 million SGF to the Safe and Secure Firearm Detection Program account for FY 2026. And that is reflected on that's item number one for FY 2026 data. In addition, the House added proviso for the Medicaid Inspector General audit. And that's the last item on the green sheet on page 1. And that included adding language requiring the Medicaid Inspector General to audit utilization and expenditures associated with complex wheelchair evaluation and repairs for FY 2026. And in addition, the agency had all other adjustments or other changes in their budget, which included an increase of 4.7 million in the base budget expenditures and a decrease of 0.7 FTE positions. And this included an increase of 2.4 million for other assistance. And once again, this was related to the Kansas Fights Addiction Fund. And also there was a $1 million increase for salary and wages expenditures in FY 2026, but this was related to the agency eliminating $800,000 in shrinkage for FY 2026. And I would also want to note on the yellow sheet for the governor's differences. So the governor did recommend the $450,000 for the relocation to the Memorial Hall. The governor also recommended the fine system funding, and the governor also recommended funding for the CISO and IT support funding. The governor added 243,000 in 2 FTE positions for that item. And once again, the governor recommended deleting the transfer of $460,000 from the Kansas Endowment for Youth to the Attorney General's Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement Compliance Fund for FY 2026. Mr. Chair, any questions for FY 2026?
Questions for 2026? Senator Hosher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, can you tell me then what you indicated were the FTE request for 2026 by the agency?
Mr. Chair, that was 5 FTEs, which included 2 positions for the CISO and IT support funding, and that was also 3 positions for the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General.
If I may follow up, you probably can't give me this information right here on the spot, but I am curious in the respect that seems like there have been a number of bills out there requesting additional FTEs. Would there be a way to get what that total number is? Because like I said, I'm a little concerned about a number of bills out there floating around that request FTEs.
Mr. Chair, we can get you that information.
And then, I have a different one.
Senator Holscher.
Thank you. Could you tell me on page 70, the 10-year history, when we look at 2022 to 2023, it looks like there was a pretty substantial change on the all funds, which then seems to kind of go around. Are you able to tell us anything about that difference?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So for FY 2023, the all fund increase was primarily due to an additional 34.5 million in distributions from the opioid litigation settlement monies, the majority of which was awarded to grants through the state or transferred to the Kansas municipalities.
Other questions? Seeing none?
Thanks.
Thank you. Did
And
you
I-
have something else?
Yes, sir. I also want to know that the House added $6 million in FY '27 for the Safe and Secure Detection Program.
Okay. Any questions on 2027? So that's an ongoing cost. Is that every year? I mean, we'll see that. I'll ask the agency. Thank you, Arana. Next, we'll have agency presentation with Attorney General Chris Kobach. Chris, welcome committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And boy, I tell you, if anyone thinks legislators don't work hard, watching you guys pour through these numbers of multiple agencies is it's mind-numbing just in the time I've been watching here. Well, I will try to hit the high points, and of course, we have agency staff here to answer any questions in detail that you might have. The biggest challenge my office has been facing ever since I took office 26 months ago is simply the shortage in attorneys. And thanks to your funding of this office, you and the House increased our funding in 2 years ago at this time and gave us an extra $700,000 to narrow the gap that had been gradually developing between what the Office of the Attorney General pays on average and what the private sector pays to an attorney with equivalent experience. When I came in, we had 25 unfilled attorney positions. That's really rough for an agency that has the kind of workload we have. With your help using that approximately $700,000, we were able to raise the wages of existing, or the salaries of existing attorneys, and then raise our ability to offer higher salaries. My testimony says that we now have, we've brought on a net of 11 attorneys. Unfortunately, I have to report that since this was printed, it's now back down to 10 attorneys. We've been victims of our own success, you might say. We've lost 3 to the new Trump administration, in large part due to some of the high-profile cases we brought successfully against the Biden administration. One of those 3 is Dan Burrows. Many of you have heard him testify. He was our chief deputy attorney general. He's now working in the White House. You may have even seen him handing executive orders to the president on television. One of the other big ones that we lost was Avi Combly, who was the head of our special litigation division, which was bringing all of those lawsuits. That was the division handling it. The Department of Justice has put him in a leadership position at the Associate Attorney General's office. And the one we just lost this week is Aaron Gady, who was kind of the second in command in that special litigation division. So we truly have been victims of our own success. The new administration, the new Department of Justice, has noticed what we've been doing for the last 2 years and unfortunately taken some of our great attorneys. So right now, we have 31.5 of our 204.1 FTEs vacant. Last year, we had 29.49 out of 195.94 FTEs vacant. We're going to continue to struggle on this. Hiring attorneys has been very, very difficult. We are able to compete with counties in term now. We weren't before when I came in, but we're still having a hard time competing with the private sector. But of course, we will continue to endeavor with your help to fill those remaining vacancies. So at this point, I believe the number of vacancies that are attorney positions, if I'm not mistaken, is now 15. But again, that's a lot better than the 25 when we came in. So let me go through some of the areas, the divisions within the agency, and talk about what we've been doing with the money that you have appropriated for us over the past few years. Lawsuits, the Special Litigation Division, which I just mentioned, was the one bringing the lawsuits against the federal government whenever the administration would violate federal law. That happened a lot. And we brought a total of 12 suits against the administration when we were either the lead state or we were co-lead state with another state. Some of those that I might mention or highlight is Kansas versus United States. This is the last one that we brought, or second to last one that we brought, and that was because the administration was giving Obamacare, or Affordable Care Act, as it's known, benefits to illegal aliens in violation of 2 federal statutes. I argued that case myself in district court, and we prevailed and got a preliminary injunction. The case is now in front of the 8th Circuit, and we are hoping that the case is fully briefed. We're not sure if the 8th Circuit is going to rule on the matter or not, given the change of administration. We also took the lead in challenging the second tranche of the Biden administration's attempt to illegally forgive student loans, and we prevailed in that case as well. Another one you might have heard of is the Title IX case, where the U.S. Department of Education was trying to change the definition of what sex discrimination is to include gender identity discrimination. We prevailed in that case as well, and I actually argued that one. But anyway, you'll see the list of the 12 cases here. I would note this, that there's only one other state over the last 2 years that had 12 cases that they were the lead state on, tying us, and that's Texas. And Texas, the Attorney General's office has over 800 attorneys. They are 10 times the size of us. So we're punching way above our weight class. And I'm really proud of my team for what we were able to do over the last 2 years. Let me move on to Public Protection Division. We brought in settlements from various state funds, to various state funds of $3.2 million roughly over the past year. The Civil Division is led by Robert Hutchison, and Robert's actually here today. They do a breadth of work from everything from providing general counsel to state agencies, defensive litigation for the state. Also licensing is within this Civil Division. On the licensing front, I would report a few high points. One is that the charity registration backlog is basically gone. At one point, the processing rate was 73 days. It's now down to 1.5 days and has remained steady. Concealed carry unit, any delays that existed 2 years ago are down. I reported that last year to this committee, but I also want to point out that in fiscal year 24, there was a 27% increase in concealed carry permits, and that's due to the legislature passing the law, which I asked you to pass, and I'm very grateful that you did, removing the $100 state fee for getting a concealed carry license. And just a side note here, this is exactly what I hoped, and I think many of you hoped would happen. Because Kansas is a constitutional carry state, you don't need the license. But there are a lot of people who might go ahead and get the training that is inherent in getting the license if it were free. And so by making at the state level, the sheriff's office may still charge a fee for the fingerprinting expenses. But by making it free at the state level, that has created the incentive for more people to get the license. And I think that's exactly what we want. We want to encourage people to get the concealed carry training, but not mandate that they get it to exercise their constitutional right to conceal carry and to keep and bear arms. Criminal Division, that's led by Jessica Domi. We have vacancies in that division as well. That one is one where our vacancies probably hurt the most, but we have some things to report. Nonetheless, we have had a lot of success in that division. In terms of restitution ordered, we have 269,000 plus, which is a double over last year. The Economic Crimes Unit, $860,000 plus in restitution. That includes, by the way, the Organized Retail Crime Authority that the legislature gave us the ability to pursue, and that authority is being used right now with some success. The Office of the Solicitor General, I think you all know our Solicitor General, Tony Powell. He's been doing an excellent job. We have a really talented team in the Solicitor General's office. This division represents the state in civil and criminal appeals. Not all criminal appeals. In some cases where a county prosecutes criminal, the larger counties will represent themselves on appeal, but many of the counties, approximately half, utilize our agency to represent them on appeals. And indeed, the testimony notes that it's 55 county attorneys, so almost exactly half. We also issue opinions, Attorney General opinions from that division, and of course, many of you request those opinions, and you have the right to request those opinions on the meaning of Kansas law or the interaction of Kansas law with federal law. 13 of them in the past fiscal year. Moving on to the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. In this past year, that office has identified 16 million plus in wasteful spending. Let me jump down to Victim Services. The Victim Services division was created and reorganized when I came in to centralize victims-focused programs. This division does a whole lot of things, including VINE, which I'll get to in a minute, but it also handles crime victims' compensation, which is funded by garnished wages from prisoners. In the past year, roughly $2.3 million in compensation was given to victims across the state of Kansas. With respect to requests, and you've already heard some of that, some overview of the requests we're making, there's basically four, broadly speaking. One is the IT or CISO request. Of course, that is pursuant to the legislature's passage of House substitute for SB 291, which of course was to increase the security requirement for all Kansas agencies. As you know, we are required to have a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, and as well as meet some other security requirements. And this is all in the wake of the Kansas judiciary security breaches that happened not so long ago. We are requesting $91,906 of state general funds to hire 2 positions in fiscal year 25, that was. In 26, we are requesting $343,426 to fill those positions. Secondly, the VINE request, the Victim Information and Notification Everyday Program. When we originally submitted our request, we were not yet, the bids had not yet been received, and so we were anticipating that it would cost about $300,000. After the RFP process has run, we've now found that we're going to need $548,000 to actually implement the program or continue implementing the program. And so that's why we're requesting the difference of $248,000 to fully support the VINE program for FY24 and FY25. So over the entire period. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a free and confidential automated victim service notification service for victims or their family members regarding offenders held in county jails in Kansas. It provides a real-time notification. It also allows the victim to make an inquiry, but it also provides a real-time notification when any offender is released from custody or there's another custody change with that offender. It's an incredibly important safety tool for victims of crimes across Kansas. And in 2024, the VINE system delivered over 100,000 notifications to victims of crimes in Kansas. The sheriffs really appreciate the program. We have 100% participation with all of the sheriff jail facilities. There are 105 counties, as you know. There are 94 county jails. The 11 counties do not have jail facilities. They rely on neighboring counties. But jail participation is voluntary, so the fact that we have 100% participation really speaks to the law enforcement community's valuing of this program. So this is an incredibly important program. Of all the things we're asking for, keeping this going is probably the most important. Third, we have the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. You've already heard a little bit about this. We're asking for $304,000 and change for 3 additional positions to support the work of the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. Last year, the legislature passed, and you may remember this, an additional $350,000 in funding for this office. But Governor Kelly exercised a veto over this funding, saying that she objected to the process. I'll just quote from her veto message. "I believe in the oversight of any program that utilizes taxpayer funding. However, this funding mechanism should have been vetted through the regular legislative budget process. I encourage the Attorney General to resubmit this request for consideration in the next budget cycle," end quote. That is, of course, what we are doing with this repeat of the previous request going through the normal budgetary process. Fourth and last, we're requesting the $450,000 to assist in relocating the agency almost entirely now into Memorial Hall, which, as you know, is a beautiful building finished in 1913. And we are blessed to be located in such a great space. But of course, with the reshuffling of the agencies caused by the construction of the new docking building, Secretary of State's office is moving out of Memorial Hall, and then we are able to bring in people in the employ of the agency who are in other buildings. So as was mentioned before, we're currently spread among 4 different buildings. We will now be able to locate almost everybody within the Memorial Hall facility. I'm really excited about this because it's just important for any law enforcement agency to, if you need to go to talk to someone in another division, you can just walk down the stairs and go into their office rather than, going across town to some other building. You might wonder, $450,000, why is that necessary? You've already got the building. I wondered that myself and talked with staff about this. There are some things that are unique to a historic building like this one. There are walls that you cannot touch, and because they're historically significant walls, and they're part of the original building. But then you've got to create offices within the space, but not touch the permanent walls. And so we have these things that usually are called panel walls. and to create a panel office out of a space that, is a large space defined by the original walls. It costs roughly $10,000 for each office, which I found to be somewhat high, but apparently that's what the Department of Administration charges us, and we're not complaining. But that's just why to take this historical facility and reconfigure some of the floors because of the changes does cost a bit of money. Also, the FBI has heightened requirements for security for our concealed carry unit. So that is a little bit more expensive office to move from one building to another. But that's a quick summary of the requests we're making, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Hosher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. In regard to those FTE requests for Medicaid inspector, my understanding is that office is to act independently in their work. So can you tell me, how do you ensure that firewall between the AG office and what they're to be doing?
Yeah, as you're undoubtedly aware, that office is principally funded through a federal grant because we're ensuring, we're seeking to prevent fraud and to, ensure that the Medicaid program, which is principally a federal program, of course, the state has great involvement in it as well. It's not the same thing as a pure firewall where attorneys cannot talk to each other and cannot share information. It's more a question of the attorneys in that office working to, essentially with two bosses. They are state employees, but they are paid for by the federal government. So it's not a complete information firewall, but in terms of the duties, their duties are defined by the Medicaid program.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Attorney General, thank you for being here. So you mentioned about your employees, and now with everybody, I wanted you to expand a little bit on that Memorial Hall move. So will there be one location where some are located still at, or is there an end date when you think everybody will be in the building?
No, it looks like, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to bring, speaking of Senator Holster's questions, the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General, or the federally funded office. That facility is in an adjoining building and was recently constructed prior to me coming on, but that's pretty new. And so we would have just that unit, Medicaid fraud unit, outside of the main building, which of course would be Memorial Hall.
And I know there's going to be there's costs with the move. You've got that included in your budget. But do you think in next year you will be seeing that because you have now just two locations, there will be savings?
That's a great question. Let me see if Tabitha has any information. Tabitha is our budget officer, Tabitha Maloney. I'm not sure if the consolidation into one building is anticipated to produce savings or not, but I'll let Tabitha. Do we have any information on that?
I can speak briefly. The question was whether or not there would be savings. I'm sorry, I was reading some notes. Is that your question coming into? The leased building that we have, the square footage is actually less than what we would pay at Memorial Hall. So overall, possibly break even. So if that's helpful at all.
Thank you. And lastly, I know with the Medicaid Inspector General, you have on your testimony that you provided with us about this potential savings. So my question is, where is there actually been, I know there's identified, but has there actually been something that's gone through because now they can be taken to court? You have that authority and power. Has anybody been taken to court, and have we actually seen recouped any funds?
Do we have that detail, Tabitha, with us in this? You want to go ahead and come on? Yeah, sure. Steve can maybe answer that question.
Steve Anderson, Medicaid Inspector General. Senator Petty, to your question, nobody's been taken to court. We do have some civil actions going on, but savings that we do talk about is example with the nursing home situation, where we identified that there were nursing homes that were billing the state or paying the wrong bed tax rate. We identified that in an audit. It's going to result in $12 million being saved per year going forward for the next several years. So that's a real savings. We've also identified situations where the KDHE was paying capitation to the MCOs for people who were deceased. Some of them had been dead for more than 5 years. and we were able to claw back that money. That was $1.3 million. So those are the type of savings we're talking about. We certainly anticipate as we have court cases go through where there will be savings to restitution, but as far as to your specific point, no.
Thank you.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, could you stay up there for just a minute? Quick question to you. So you're asking for 3 FTE new ones. Could you have 5? That's my question. Is there enough room? I'm convinced that's very cost effective of what you're trying to do. So
I appreciate that, sir. Yeah, we could definitely use more staff if it was available, but you're trying to stay within budget, but 5 would be a great number.
it would pay itself back.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a school downstairs, so I will be brief. I trust this question was not asked. If it was, I apologize. But I notice, General, that in 25 for safe and secure firearm detection, there is $7 million ask. By the time you get the money, there's only going to be 3 months left unless we've already given it to you this year, and this is just making certain you have it. And then in 26, there's $7 million. Then 27, there's $6 million. Number one, safe and secure firearm detection program. I don't know what that is or why it would cost $7 million. I don't know if the accredited non-public schools are requesting this in addition to public entities. It just seems like $20 million to tell me if somebody in the building has a weapon or not. I don't want people to know if I got a weapon or not. But can you sort of help me understand this safe and secure firearm detection program, why it's so expensive, and is it something that you mentioned accredited non-public schools?
Yeah, I think we may be able to get back to you with a more specific answer on that. I know that this program has, a statutory source, but I'm not familiar with what the reason for the amount fluctuating is from year to year. I don't know if Tabitha has those numbers. If not, we can get you that detail. We don't have them. No, we don't have that right now, but I share your curiosity there because why it would change is I don't have the information right now, but I can get it for you.
That would be appreciated because, Mr. Chairman, I just don't understand why so much money.
We can have staff answer that here in a minute.
So would that be now? Oh, I should have known Mr. Deere would have the answer. I should have just asked him.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, with permission. So that money was originally in Safe and Secure Schools in the Department of Education. It was moved to the Office of the Attorney General to procure a contract in order to be able to identify shooters, some sort of AI detection system that would see weapons and then automatically call and mobilize the police. There was a discussion in House Appropriations regarding why there was $7 million in the current fiscal year with only a few months remaining, and the idea was to pre-fund the contract was the response provided.
We pre-fund the contract. We
sort of like the original amount to do the contract, yes, sir.
We give them the money before they ever accomplish anything.
I'm only
say it that way. I'm not asking your opinion, but okay. And so, but it's an ongoing $7 million and then $6 million cost.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, the discussion in House Appropriations was that that would steadily expand to more and more schools over time.
Okay, I got an answer. Not acceptable, but got an answer.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the question that Senator Fagg asked about, could you use 5 instead of 3 inspectors? Or if you were to do that, could we look for, I don't like adding FTEs, but we've heard here just today that not all FTEs are being used. So is it possible, do we not think that we could grab 2 FTEs from some other agency that is not using their FTEs and transfer it to an agency that really does the work on that?
You would know better than I whether you can pull FTEs from one agency and give them to another. I think you've heard from our Inspector General that we could use the positions. I believe that the current 3 are non-attorney positions. Is that correct? And so, if you're bringing in attorneys, then we have the problem that I face every day of trying to recruit and hire. But I think those are non-attorney positions. Is that? Yeah, those are non-attorney positions, so my anticipation is we could fill them rather quickly in contrast to the attorney positions.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? See, now, while I have you here, I understand that the folks moving out of the building over there, the Curtis, are leaving all the furniture. They're getting all new furniture over in Dockings, what I was told, so maybe you can make use of that, partitions and so forth, so.
I will take that back to our team. Our chief of staff, who's not here with me today, is managing this shuffling of offices. But I'm sure they're anticipating not just leaving stuff around and trying to utilize what we have.
Well, I've seen an ask for a lot of money for new walls and desks and everything else. So it looks to me like if not, they're going to move it to an empty building somewhere. So maybe it'll save some money for you.
Well, I hope so, Senator. And I share your same questions, because when I started, questioning staff about why is it $450,000, then I saw these high prices just for the walls. I was assuming all along that people are bringing their desk from one building to the other. But I'll dig deeper into that at your request.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the State Fire Marshal. We'll have a staff overview by Kyle Anderson, KLRD. Kyle, welcome back. Are we still in volume 1 or 2, or which volume are we in?
We are going back to volume 2, unfortunately. We are now going to be on page 476. And it will be page 25 of your green shorthand.
What was that page in the
It should be volume 2. In volume 2, it's page 476.
476.
Sorry about that. So, to begin with, on page 476, we have the breakdown table across the last year's actuals, and then the fiscal year 2025 and 2026 revised request and request, respectively. And the agency's fiscal year 2025 request is for $9.94 million, and the agency's 2026 request is for $11.1 million. The current House position is for $9.88 million in fiscal year 2025 and $11.18 million in fiscal year 2026. Proceeding to page 478, the breakdown of the fiscal year 2025 funds, there is no SGF reappropriation to the organization. But they do have one supplemental request for an economic impact contractor for $60,000. This is in response to the requirement in 2024's HB 2648 that required an economic impact statement for any changes to rules and regulations that may be required by the agency, and the agency is currently looking to update the state fire marshal state fire regulations. Are there any questions about fiscal year 2025? Oh, I should note that that is currently not funded.
The House left it out?
Yes.
Okay. Questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
Moving to page 481, the 2026 budget has two enhancement requests. The first enhancement request is for a salary progression plan associated with the inspectors and investigations division members to create a greater pay parity with the highway patrol. That was a $401,000 request and is not currently funded. And the agency, again, in fiscal year 2026, requested the economic impact contractor for $60,000. As with fiscal year 2025, that is unfunded in the current House position. The House did add an additional item through a floor amendment. You may have remember from Monday, the judiciary budget had $500,000 removed from it. That $500,000 was moved to the state fire marshal to continue grants for volunteer fire departments. And the agency purchases protective equipment for volunteer fire departments around the state with those monies and distributes it as part of a grant program that the agency has run since fiscal year 2017. Any questions on fiscal year 2026?
Questions? Seeing none? Oh, Senator Petty.
Was there, I can't find the sheet, but was there governors, anything?
There are no differences between the governor's recommendation and the LBC position, so there's no yellow sheet.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed on item number 6 in 26, the boiler inspection fee fund of $80,000 removal because they lost their boiler inspector, I understand.
Mr. Chair,
Fill that position?
the boiler inspector was moved to a different division.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Kyle, and we'll next have the agency presentation with the Fire Marshal Mark Engelholm. Mark, welcome committee.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I'll keep it short. I know everyone is wanting to get on their way. And I'll just talk to those issues, if you don't mind, that we, enhancements and changes. So the $500,000 that's SGF that you talked about, that was moved on the floor of the House, that is all pass-through money that we will pass through. I don't, honestly, it's great that it can come through our office, it can come through the governor's office, whatever else, but that money is badly needed by our local volunteer fire departments. So our agency started this program with internal operations money that we had an excess of for a while out of our fee fund. And it was never intended to be continued out of our fee fund forever. It's been kind of a scraped together thing, but we were able to last year only fund with $400,000, 18% of the requests. And that bought 101 sets of head-to-toe protective gear for volunteer fire departments. And every fire department that we gave that money to had an annual budget of $25,000 a year or less. One of them, when we just found out, that doesn't even have a fire station. Their fire trucks are kept in they own fire trucks, but they're actually housed at farms in their area. So these are departments that are really trying to scrape by, and we've tried to focus that whole program specifically on protecting those firefighters so they're not getting burned. I don't want to go back up to KU Med Center and sit and talk to a volunteer who gets burned, as we did this last fall when his fire truck was stuck in front of when his fire truck got stuck in front of a fire, and he tried to run, and the fire overtook him, and he ended up with first, second, third-degree burns on his arms, head, and face. And it's just tough to see someone like that, in this case, 70-year-old man, who was giving his time to his community, trying to help his folks. So, and did not have the proper PPE, the proper equipment, and that's where we focus that. So I'm very, very happy to see that the House did that. I hope that that will remain in the budget. I understand it's a tough year for funding. We're looking in the future at how we can sustain that program. There are 16,000 firefighters in the state. Roughly 90% of them are volunteers who do it without charging the state. And we just have to figure out how how we can continue supporting those local departments that are dealing with very low local tax bases and just trying to keep going. So thank you on that. The 60,000, I think we're going to address that in a different way. I think we're looking at adopting some different processes. The state fire code, the rules and regulation process, I guess we can get into this a little bit or a lot, depends on how much you want, but the rules and regulation process it works very well if I'm going in and I'm maybe writing a paragraph or I'm taking a very small portion. But if I'm walking in there with a document that's between 1,500 and 1,700 pages that deals with everything, that deals from fire to explosives to hazardous materials, and how the tanker truck that's driving by here with its load of hazardous materials, how it's built. When we deal with something like that, trying to get it through regulations process, it just bogs down. Our last attempt that I inherited as we came in had been in the process of updating to newer codes for 3 years. And then we hit then unfortunately the change in law came through on the economic impact study, and we're at a loss of how we deal with something that is that wide ranging. How do I give you an honest answer to what effect it has on the people of Kansas? So we're working through that. Those points put in there were more of an opportunity for me to get in front of the legislature and talk about some of those concerns than an actual request. But it did give me the opportunity, so I guess it worked. So please disregard those. Those are not, at this point, priorities. My priority coming before you today, though, is that $401,000 for our law enforcement officers. So I think all of you are well aware in your communities and everything else that what law enforcement has gone through in the last 4 or 5 years and the increases. Right now, we have 10 investigators, special agents across the state of Kansas who are subject matter experts in conducting arson investigations and homicide investigations, and that is their job. To get those people, we bring in certified, experienced law enforcement officers. To get in our door, you have to be a law enforcement officer for 5 years. You have to be certified, 5 years experience, at least 2 years of being a felony investigator, a detective. So those are the minimums to walk in the door to even apply for us. And then I can offer them $1.50 an hour less than a recruit walking in with a high school diploma and a driver's license to the Highway Patrol Academy the first day. So that's why I'm trying right now to fill 2 positions. My 8 people are covering the whole state instead of 10, and we have 2 open positions in Northeast Kansas that we're working very hard to fill. We're not asking that they be placed on their own plan. What we're asking is for pay parity with the Highway Patrol. We're asking that we simply be allowed to place them at the same place they would be if they were a trooper or a Capitol Police officer in that same position. Having been a trooper, I think that's reasonable. I see what these guys do and gals do. I see how they're going out there. They're not only working crime scenes and all these, they're working in a hazardous materials area. I think we've all seen the fires in California and talked about that. What's left after a fire today in a home is completely different than it was 20 or 30 years ago, because all the different chemicals we mix together and how we make the furniture and the glues that are in it, they're working in an environment that's putting them in danger of getting cancer every day on that. So that goes beyond also. So what we're asking for, this has no SGF impact. This is 100% fee fund. We have the money in our fee fund. We would just like the authority to draw that down and use it to give them the parity of pay that they deserve. So, and when appropriate, I'll stand for questions.
Questions? Seeing none, I think you did a great job.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Next, we will have the Board of Indigent Defense Services staff overview with Molly Pratt, KLRD. Molly, welcome back.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Molly Pratt. I'm a fiscal analyst with the Legislative Research Department, and I will be presenting the budget request for the Board of Indigent Defense Services. You will note that there is a yellow sheet that describes the differences between the governor's recommendation and the Special Committee on Legislative Budget. Whenever I get to an item that includes something on this list, I will make sure you all know which pages to turn to and all of that. All right. So, the Board of Indigent Defense Services is tasked with providing and supervising constitutionally and statutorily required legal services for indigent defendants accused of felonies. And I'm sorry, I am on page 116 of Volume 1.
$116, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Please proceed.
Okay. As many of you know, the Kansas Public Defense System consists of the regional public defender offices and the assigned counsel program. Attorneys who are classified as public defenders are employees of the state who work at one of the public defense offices located in the state. Attorneys who are classified as assigned counsel are either private attorneys who volunteer to serve on local appointment panels in each judicial district, where they're assigned felony cases in exchange for the current bid's hourly rate, which in fiscal year 2025 will increase to $125 per hour. Or they are private attorneys who have accepted contracts from bids to handle felony cases in certain jurisdictions under negotiated terms. Turning to page 5, you will note that the agency is requesting a total of $69.8 million. Item 1 concerns the SGF reappropriation into fiscal year 2026. The agency's request includes $7.8 million in reappropriations. The Special Committee on Legislative Budget retained $793,265 of this amount and lapsed $7 million. The amounts kept were for capital defense operations and assigned counsel vouchers. The amount removed was $7 million for general operating expenditures. If you turn to page 3 of your green shorthand sheet, you'll note that the House Committee on Appropriations added back $1 million. So the current total amount lapsed would be $6 million in fiscal year 2025. The governor on your yellow sheet recommended that the agency delete $1.5 million in reappropriations, so the agency would retain $6.3 million to account for operating expenditures and assigned counsel caseloads. The agency does not have any supplemental requests in fiscal year 2025. Items 3 and 4 just state that the agency had a balance forward in the Indigent Defense Services Fund and in the in-service workshop fee fund. Expenditures would go toward paying the cost and fees for court reporters and expert witness services, as well as offsetting costs incurred for providing CLE workshops. And both of those amounts are included within House Bill 2007. Within House Bill 2007, the current amount appropriated in fiscal year 2025 for the agency is $63.8 million. And with that, I would be happy to stand for questions on fiscal year 2025 or move on to fiscal year 2026.
Questions on 25? Just one. So the reappropriations were lapsed for $1.5 million in 25?
Mr. Chair, that is what the governor recommended, the $1.5 million. The total amount reappropriated is, I believe, $6 million. The current amount lapsed would be $6 million.
So the governor lapsed this, correct?
The governor recommended lapsing $1.5 million.
Okay, but 6 million got lapsed? Is that what you just said earlier?
In House Bill 2007, $6 million is lapsed.
So the House did 6, the governor did 1.5.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
The analysis for fiscal year 2026 begins on page 120. The agency requests a total of about $73.1 million and 318.2 FTE positions for fiscal year 2026. The first enhancement request relates to public defender's pay parity. The agency requests $6.7 million SGF to provide a 28% pay increase for public defense attorneys and a 10% pay increase for non-attorneys. An August 2024 employee well-being survey conducted by the bids board found that approximately 75% of responding defenders had considered leaving the public defense sector in Kansas due to salary concerns. The agency said that in fiscal year 2022, 1 in every 5 public defenders left the defense sector. The agency is concerned that future staffing losses could result in public defenders being so overworked that indigent persons in Kansas will not be able to receive adequate counsel. As such, the agency requests compensation adjustments for public defense attorneys to maintain adequate pay parity with prosecutors for fiscal year 2026. Neither the LBC nor the House recommended funding for this enhancement request. The governor partially recommended funding the enhancement request in the amount of $1.7 million for public defense attorneys to receive a 10% pay increase. So just to clarify, the agency requests a 28% pay increase for public defense attorneys. The governor is recommending a 10% increase. The special committee on LBC nor the House are recommending increases. Item 2 relates to ethical caseloads. The agency requests $4.3 million SGF and 29 FTE positions to increase the number of attorney and non-attorney staff for fiscal year 2026. Due to the constitutional requirement that indigent defendants in Kansas have adequate counsel, public defense attorneys are often tasked with taking on a large number of cases each year. According to the agency, in fiscal year 2024, each trial-level public defender in Kansas had an average caseload of about 158 cases. The American Bar Association recommends that an attorney spend between 35 and about 250 hours on each case, depending on the level of severity. According to bids, public defenders in Kansas cannot spend that amount of time on each case. Once again, the Special Committee on Legislative Budget nor the House recommended funding for this enhancement request. The governor did not recommend funding the request either. However, you will note on the yellow sheet, item 2, that the governor recommended adding $4.8 million SGF to adopt the assigned counsel caseload estimate for fiscal year 2026. This was not adopted by the special committee or the House. The current amount approved by the House that is in House Bill 2007 is about $62.1 million, including $61.3 million SGF. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will be happy to stand for questions on fiscal year 2026.
Questions on 2026? Seeing none. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Next, we will have agency presentation by Heather Cessna, Executive Director. Heather, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee, for having me today to talk about our budget. And thank you, Molly, for your presentation. I was going to start off just kind of giving a little bit of context to the conversation that we're having, because I think that's always important, which is that, obviously you all heard the budget from the KBI earlier this morning and from the Attorney General's office. What you don't hear are the 105 district attorneys' offices and county attorneys' offices that take their budgets to their local county commissions every year for their staffing needs and their budget needs so that they can bring cases in Kansas. Obviously, as you've heard me say before, 84% of all adult felony cases in Kansas require appointed counsel because the individuals are found to be indigent, and all of those counsel are provided by the Board of Indigent Defense Services, whether it's through our public defense offices or through the assigned counsel program. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about cases. If I don't have an attorney to stand up in every single one of those cases across Kansas, across from the prosecutor's offices, those cases get dismissed for Sixth Amendment violations. That is what is happening in other states like Oregon. Obviously, we would like to avoid that happening in places like Kansas. So I was going to just confine my comments, unless you have specific questions, to kind of our most immediate needs. Obviously, as you heard from Molly, we made several requests last September for some additional funding for salary increases for our public defenders in order to have pay parity with prosecutors. A portion of that was recommended by the governor's office. We also asked for some additional FTEs for fiscal year 2026. Given how some of the budget negotiations went with the House, our biggest concerns for this conversation are with fiscal year 2025 and our reappropriations funds. Right now, House Bill 2007 has a lapse of about $6 million of our current reappropriation funds. With our current budget projections and having made some decisions internally on some things, basically what we need is to retain an additional $1.4 million of that in order to pay our bills between now and the end of the fiscal year. So what we would be asking this committee to consider is reducing that lapse from House Bill 2007 from $6 million to about $4.6 million to allow us to have that ability to make sure that we're paying our bills. And that is going to cover essentially obligations that we already have through the end of this year, as well as a couple IT security items that were identified as part of our LPA audit last year for IT security. The other thing that we are asking is making sure that we're retaining the funding that we need in order to be able to fill our vacant positions. I know, just jumping off from the conversation that was had during the conversation with Director Mativi from the KBI earlier, and from Attorney General Kobach, we're in the same position as the Attorney General's office, where hiring attorneys takes an extended period of time because of the shortage of counsel in Kansas generally, and specifically the shortage of counsel that's willing to do criminal defense work. And so that process does require approximately an 8 to sometimes 12 months, depending on when we make offers, of holding positions open to be able to fill those positions. So while we're certainly interested in the conversations about how to effectively address like some of the concerns that have been raised as part of Senate Bill 99 and as part of the budget proviso language in House Bill 2007 about how to appropriately handle that, our biggest concern is that we just need to make sure that we can retain that funding in a way that when we are making these offers, that we have the budget authority to be able to make those offers early on, even if those individuals don't start until later. Essentially, what we have to do is make those offers during the beginning of individuals' third year of law school in order for them to then graduate the following May, take the bar the following July, and then on board sometime during that summer or early fall between either graduation if they get their temporary license early, or when they actually pass the bar and get their results in September. So, and the comment, just like I said, jumping off from some of the conversation that was had earlier about potentially having that funding for those positions residing with the State Finance Council. I think my biggest concern, at least from our perspective, would be if that's the proposal, is that to the extent that there may cause additional delays in our ability to make those offers, oftentimes even a delay of a day or two can have a significant impact on whether or not we miss out on a candidate, because it is so competitive to hire those positions. And so if, my suggestion would be if there's some kind of an accounting process may be required so that we additionally can account for funding that's not used for those positions to lapse at like the end of the fiscal year, but where we still have that funding in-house to be able to use it for those positions as soon as we can make those offers. That would probably alleviate the concern that I have about potential delays involving asking for additional permission from the State Finance Council. But certainly we are open to discussions on how we can address your concerns about those positions and that funding while still meeting our needs to be able to fill those positions. So And then last but not least, going into fiscal year 2026, the general 1.5% reduction in operations that's kind of generally included in House Bill 2007 for state agencies, that concerns us because we are currently violating essentially the Sixth Amendment in operating without the lack of staffing that we need to be able to meet the current obligations that we have. And so any additional reductions in our ability to fund those operations going forward obviously is great concern to us. So those are kind of the highlights of what I'm most concerned about. Certainly, if you want to talk about any of the other additional requests that we had originally made last fall, I'm happy to talk about those. The budget request that we had made for pay parity was based on the fact that our salaries are about 28% behind where prosecutor salaries are right now for our public defenders. Obviously, the governor didn't agree to suggest funding for that full request of about 28% difference, but certainly any additional help that we might be able to get on salaries is always good for us. So if the committee decides to go that direction with that, obviously, we're happy to have that conversation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In years past, the court system has, these are my words, done a lousy job of making certain that these indigent defendants are indeed indigent. They would just simply ask, well, can you afford an attorney? And they'd say no. Well, we're not dealing with the most honest people. If we were, they would not be in court charged with a crime. Has the court or has BIDS made some improvements to where now we do know 100%, because some of these drug dealers, for example, have a lot of assets, a lot of jewelry, a lot of vehicles, etc., but yet we are defending them because they are indigent. But we find stacks and stacks of cash. In any event, has the court system, has BIDS, or do we as a legislature need to do some things to step up to make certain we are not providing taxpayer-funded lawyers for people who can provide their own legal counsel?
Chairman, I appreciate the question. I will start off by just saying that for most of our clients, obviously, are coming into the system, they're presumed innocent until proven guilty, just to start from that perspective. But to your specific question, we have an extensive and detailed affidavit of indigency that they have to fill out with all kinds of information. There's a full opportunity for each court in each case to ask questions, ask for proof, to go through and assess that on a case-by-case basis. And it does have to be a case-by-case basis because you're trying to do things like balance the, the person's actual income versus like if they have other obligations like child support and things like that. You don't want to have a negative impact on children involved in the system because of a criminal case that has, obviously that's not related to their fault. And so there's an extensive multiple-page indigency affidavit that requires all of that proof. Each judge has to go through that on every single case before they find indigency in those cases. And if there at any point in time during the process of the case, there's any question as to whether or not the individual is truly indigent, there are statutory and regulatory requirements that be brought to the attention of the court.
Okay, you said the court has an opportunity. The previous director had told me there were multiple occasions when they proved to the court assets, but the court did not make any changes. They just continued to allow the person to be defended with taxpayer dollars. So I guess I'm just curious as to if you have seen in your time any improvement from the courts in listening to BIDS when you say or prove, document that this person is really not indigent.
I have not had any concerns with the level of detail that the courts have been using to look at those questions or the standard of proof that they're using to require, people to submit their affidavits to them to be able to do that. So I have not. I think the biggest problem, one of the things that contributes to the number of people who end up being involved in requiring indigency affidavits is, quite frankly, the substantial cost that it takes to be able to defend a case. If you were going to hire a private defense attorney to handle any of these cases, you're probably paying closer to like $300 or $400 hour for those attorneys in private practice. And while we obviously are not paying anywhere near that for either our public defenders or our assigned counsel, just the cost of being able to defend these cases between doing the on our end, which we pay for out of our budget, like the investigation that you need to do with investigators and experts and all of that. It just makes the cost of being able to defend these cases extreme for most normal people, even at what you probably wouldn't necessarily consider poor status, but because of the severe cost of the case to be able to defend, it requires a lot more investment than what like your normal off the road person would be able to fund.
I would just urge vigilance on the part of bids to make certain that we're being efficient with taxpayer dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is will be brief. I just wanted to clarify. So when you talked about your 2025 budget, and there was a carryover of or your 2024, I guess, $7.8 million. And you were saying that in order to be able to pay your bills, you would need how much?
So right now, the current lapse in 2007 is only 6 million of that. We need essentially an additional 1.4 of that back to be able to pay our bills before the end of the year. So this will be basically a reduction of that lapse in 2007 to 4.6 million. Does that clarify your question? Okay.
That's what I had down. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at your expenditures 24 through 26, and I see a large increase in bids administration in 26. Can you explain what that's for? Went from, in 25, went from 9 million to 13 million.
On the, I think was, that was probably for the requested amount, not the actual.
It just says that's the expenditures by program on page 123.
I don't have that. Thank you. On page 123, bids administration from 25 to 26. So I believe that includes the additional cost of the proposed pay increase that we were asking for, which did not get funded by the House Bill 2007, and it wasn't fully suggested as being funded by the governor's office, because that would go to salaries for the public defenders. So we had asked for like the 6.7 million for that, but that was not recommended as part of those, that up to the, like from the 2 to 13, that's the agency request, I believe, but I can have KLRD confirm that if you're worried. Does that help answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay. It was part of our request, it just wasn't funded.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Amber for being here, or Heather, excuse me, for being here today, appreciate it. Committee, I'd like to remind everyone that we will start at 8:30 tomorrow morning. So we'll, with that.